Hey guys, it's Sagar, and in this video, I'm going to compare the cameras on the iPhone 16 with the ones on the iPhone 16 Pro. Now, this part of the video is being recorded with the main rear cameras on both these phones, so you guys know how both of them perform in the outdoor lighting conditions. Even my audio is being recorded internally, so I'll be switching between both these audios, and you guys let me know in the comments which one do you think is picking my sound better. Now this year, Apple upgraded all the rear cameras on both these phones, and in many ways, they brought the cameras on the regular iPhone 16 much closer to the ones on the iPhone 16 Pro. This is making many people wonder if the cameras on the iPhone 16 Pro are really much better than the ones on the iPhone 16. And if not, should they just go with the iPhone 16 since its prices are coming down with each ongoing sale and save a bunch of cash and still be able to take amazing images. And after comparing the images and videos from both these phones, I must say all of these are very valid questions. Now I believe most of you might know it by this point that the iPhone 16 Pro gets 3 cameras on the back whereas the 16 gets 2 cameras. This is actually the major visual differentiator between these two phones. The main rear camera on the iPhone 16 Pro gets a new 48 megapixel sensor with f1.8 aperture and 24mm lens. The main camera on the iPhone 16 also gets 48 megapixel sensor with f1.6 aperture and 26mm lens, but this is the same image sensor as the iPhone 15 and physically it is smaller than the one on the iPhone 16 Pro. Ultra-wide camera gets the biggest upgrade on both phones. On the iPhone 16 Pro, it is now a 48 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture and a 13mm lens. On the iPhone 16, it is still a 12 megapixel sensor, but this is a newer sensor with f2.2 aperture and 13mm lens, which also gets autofocus. So just like the Pro iPhones, this one can take macro shots as well, making the dual cameras on the back of this phone act like a triple camera setup. 16 Pro gets a third 12 megapixel sensor with 120mm or 5x telephoto lens. This one was first seen on the iPhone 15 Pro Max last year, but this year it has made its way to the smaller iPhone 16 Pro as well. And at the front, both of them get the same 12 megapixel camera with f1.9 aperture and 24mm lens. With all the specifications out of the way, let us start by checking out the daytime shots from both these phones. Both phones have 48 megapixel sensors for their main camera, but these are binned 24 megapixel shots from both of them as that is how these phones are set by default. We will be looking at and comparing the 48 megapixel shots a bit later in the video. I think it should be self-explanatory from the text on the images, but if it is not, then images on the right side of your screen are from the iPhone 16 Pro and ones on the left side are from the iPhone 16. I can understand why some of you might be confused, because these images from both the phones look almost identical. Colors look the same, white balance and color temperature is the same, and both even handle the exposure in the exact same way. The only subtle visible change in these shots is the focal length. iPhone 16 Pro has a 24mm lens in front of the main sensor, so its images are capturing slightly wider field of view compared to the 26mm one on the iPhone 16. I know many people might not have noticed this as well, so even if the iPhone 16 Pro gets a bigger sensor behind the main camera, for most of the daytime shots, there is basically no noticeable difference between the images from both of them. Now if we zoom in, there are slightly more details in the 16 Pro's images, but the difference is really very minute. For indoor shots, 16 Pro captures slightly brighter images, whereas ones from the iPhone 16 seem slightly dull in comparison. It seems like the bigger sensor is helping the 16 Pro gather much more light in these situations. This is very apparent in some of the shots like this one, while in others, you might have to look very closely to even notice this. In most conditions, colors also look exactly same from both the phones, which is not surprising as both of them are putting the raw information that sensor gathers through the exact same image processing pipeline. So any difference that we are seeing in these colors would be due to the difference in the raw data being gathered by the image sensor. The best example of this would be these next set of images. We can see the image from the iPhone 16 be much cooler and showing slightly different colors than the noticeably warmer shot from the iPhone 16 Pro. Well, this is now because the iPhone 16 Pro has a wider field of view, so it was able to get the wooden ceiling in the frame, and this results in the phone's processing taking its colors in the mix as well to set the accurate white balance of the shot, making the overall tones slightly warmer. We don't see that part of the ceiling being captured in the iPhone 16's image, so it doesn't have to worry about it, and hence its image is slightly cooler. If the 16 Pro would have captured a narrower scene, or the 16 would have captured some parts of the ceiling, we would have seen similar colors from both the phones in the images. For rest of the shots, I tried to frame the scene as closely as I can on both the phones, so no matter the lighting conditions, you will see similar colors and white balance from both these phones. So in terms of white balance, colors and overall color temperature, both the phones capture similar images. If you don't like the colors coming out of either of these phones, both of them offer advanced photographic styles with much more customizable options compared to previous phones. This way, you can set a particular look or style for your photos, and if you want, you can leave it as a default to have it baked into all of your shots. I prefer leaving it to standard and making the changes that I want for a specific image later on. HDR Shots is where we notice the next major difference between both these phones. Even without zooming in, you can see the iPhone 16 Pro is handling both brighter and darker parts better in this set of images. You can see that there are more details and light under this gazebo in its image, whereas the same area is much darker in the iPhone 16's image. We can also see a lot more details in these leaves in the iPhone 16 Pro's image, while they are a lot darker in the 16th shot. I clicked this shot from both the phones within a span of 10 to 15 seconds, so the lighting conditions between the shot has not changed at all. But we can still see a very big difference in the images from both these phones. One from the 16 Pro is much nicer and balanced, whereas one from the iPhone 16 seems to have an overall faded look to it. Both the phones did well to not let the sky blow out and bring an amazing amount of details in the shadows. But due to the sun, which was just outside the frame behind this building, there was a bit of flare hitting the cameras, which the iPhone 16 Pro managed really well, but the iPhone 16 did not, and that's the reason its image is having a faded look to it. This is again a tough shot for any smartphone's camera. The subject, which is the building in this shot, is in shadows and almost backlit by the sun, which is also in the shot. Both the phones did not let the sky blow out and managed to bring up a lot of details from the shadows as well. If we look closer, we can see slightly more light in the shadows from the iPhone 16 Pro, but the difference is not a lot, and I would say both of them did very well in this situation. Same for this shot. Both have done a good job, but the 16 Pro was able to add more light to the shadowed parts of these trees. This shows better dynamic range on its part, but I also feel like iPhone 16's image is creating more contrast due to the slightly darker shadows, and I feel some people might actually prefer its image over the iPhone 16 Pro. So overall, for HDR situations, in most of the cases, both of these phones take similar images. But in some cases where the situation is very harsh, I feel like the iPhone 16 Pro is doing a slightly better job. I can obviously see this because I am comparing the images from both these phones side by side. But if I was looking at the ones only from the iPhone 16, I feel it does a wonderful job with the HDR shots on its own. So the difference while being there is not that huge. Close-up shots look amazing from both the phones. Both are very fast at setting the focus, and subject are very sharp, with the rest of the background getting a creamy optical bokeh. Since the iPhone 16 Pro gets a bigger image sensor, it is obvious that the background in its close-up shots is blurred out a bit more. But again, this is something you will notice only when you are comparing the shots from both these phones side by side. iPhone 16 has a better minimum focusing distance of the two, so it lets you get slightly more closer to the scene for taking these shots. On the iPhone 16 Pro, you will have to be an inch or two away from the subject for the camera to set the focus. To get the similar framing as the iPhone 16, I am clicking these close-up shots on the iPhone 16 Pro at 28 or 35mm focal length. So these ones from the iPhone 16 Pro are 1.2 or 1.5x digitally zoomed in shots. If you want to get even closer to your subject, both the phones do offer a macro mode where they use the ultra-wide angle lens to let you get this close to the subject and still set the focus on it, resulting in amazing macro shots. This is the first year where Apple has added this feature on the non-Pro iPhone, so this makes the dual camera setup on the iPhone 16 act like a triple camera setup. Since these ones are being captured with the ultra-wide angle lens, which has a slightly smaller sensor and a narrower aperture compared to the main camera, it is best to take these macro shots in very well-lit conditions. These lenses don't have OIS, so also make sure to hold the phone very steady while you are taking these shots from both the phones. Although these macro shots are being captured with the 48MP wide lens on the iPhone 16 Pro, the end result is still pinned 12MP shot, and honestly, I don't see any extra bit of details in the macros from the iPhone 16 Pro. So macro shots from both these phones look pretty much identical. If I had to choose one for the macro shots, I will go with the iPhone 16 because it actually lets me get a centimeter or so closer to the subject than the iPhone 16 Pro. So the macro shooting option was one of the features which had been missing on all of the previous non-Pro iPhones. And with its addition, Apple has brought the cameras on this iPhone 16 much closer to the ones on the iPhone 16 Pro. Now both the phones get an ultra-wide angle lens, and as you all know, other than for shooting macros, we can use them for taking ultra-wide angle shots as well. This is actually their main job, so it's really important that they take good ultra-wide shots. Here we can see the ultra-wide shots from both, and they make sure to capture a much wider perspective of the scene compared to the main camera. These images look so similar that one might think that they have been captured with the same camera, but I did take both the phones out to take all of these images. I think this is a big point in favor of the regular iPhone 16 because right now it is taking pretty much similar images as the iPhone 16 Pro, even with the ultra-wide angle lens. And this is even more amazing because the 16 Pro now gets a 48MP sensor behind this ultra-wide angle lens. It is capturing 12MP bin shots with it, which is the same resolution as the ultra-wide angle lens on the iPhone 16. But even when all of that data is crammed into the shots from the iPhone 16 Pro, we just see a little bit of more sharpness into its ultra-wide angle shot, and that too when we crop in 4 to 500% and compare these images side by side. Otherwise, I see basically no difference between these shots from so far. I've seen people saying in their videos that they could see a huge difference between the ultra wide angle shots from both the phones, but for some reason I just couldn't replicate those results. I took a lot of ultra wide angle shots from both of them and compared side by side and still couldn't tell a difference straight away. So for everyday normal outdoor shots, the ultra wide angle lens on the iPhone 16 is just as good as the one on the iPhone 16 Pro. When it comes to zoomed shots, both these phones get the option of 2x zoom on the viewfinder. But just so that you know, none of these phones have a separate 2x optically zoomed in camera. Both of them use the middle 12 megapixels of the main image sensor to crop in and take these so-called lossless 2x zoomed in shots. Apple has been doing this on their Pro iPhones since they first started using the 48 megapixel sensor, and they claim that this zoom is actually lossless. We don't have a way to verify if it is lossless or not, but I feel that 2x digitally zoomed in shots look pretty good from both the phones. Now since the iPhone 16 Pro has a slightly bigger main sensor, there appears to be ever so slightly more details in its 2x zoomed in shots. Like if you look here, we see more details in its images compared to the 16's image. So yes, the iPhone 16 Pro does capture more details, but again the difference is very minute. You can look at these images and see for yourself. Even in indoor and low light conditions, we don't see that huge of a difference in the 2x shots from both these phones. When it comes to zooming even further, things take a huge turn in favor of the iPhone 16 Pro. Here is a 5x digitally zoomed in shot from both the phones. iPhone 16 uses digital zoom on the main image sensor, and the 16 Pro has a dedicated 5x telephoto zoom, so its images look much cleaner, sharper and detailed. When it comes to zooming in so far, the regular iPhone 16 is nowhere near the iPhone 16 Pro's telephoto camera. Now I wanted to capture a good shot of these flowers, but they were a bit too high, so I switched to the 5x lens on the iPhone 16 Pro and the 5x digital zoom on the iPhone 16, and here are the results. iPhone 16 Pro's shot looks so much better. It is cleaner, sharper and has much less grain or noise in it. You can see this in all of the shots. I mean, ones from the iPhone 16 are not really that bad. If I was looking at its image alone, I think it looks decent until we don't zoom in on it further digitally. What I am trying to say is, you can still make out what is what in the 5x digitally zoomed in shot from the main camera of the iPhone 16. But when you compare it against the ones from the iPhone 16 Pro, there is just no comparison. I am not the one to take too many of these zoomed in shots, but if I ever had to, iPhone 16 Pro would be my obvious choice. I recently went on a trip to Ladakh, and this zoomed in telephoto lens on the iPhone 16 Pro came in very handy. You can keep on zooming in digitally on both the phones, and here are the 10x digitally zoomed in shots from them. Now one from the 16 is again zoomed in with the main camera, but one on the 16 Pro is a zoomed in shot from the 5x telephoto lens, so we see its images being much more sharper and detailed. Here are some 10x zoomed in shots from Ladakh. They still look fairly detailed considering that they are digitally zoomed in shots. I can't even imagine the regular 16 capturing so many details when zoomed in this far digitally. So after being almost neck to neck with the cameras on the iPhone 16, this is where the extra telephoto lens on the iPhone 16 Pro takes it way ahead in the competition. If you like to do nature or landscape photography, then I think this zoomed in camera will come in very handy for you. But if not, and you take these zoomed in shots very occasionally, then I still think the regular iPhone 16 is the one to get. Now here are 48 megapixel shots on the main cameras of both phones. These images have much more detail compared to the 24 megapixel default shots, and we can see those extra details when we zoom in on them. You can keep on zooming in 3 times or 5 times and you still see a ton of details in these images. Even at 7x or 700% zoom, we still see a lot of details in their shots, but you will notice something very interesting. iPhone 16 is adding more sharpness to its images, making things in its images feel more detailed, and because of that, things in the images from the iPhone 16 Pro look a lot softer in comparison. Initially, I thought that the smaller image sensor on the iPhone 16 is able to capture more information, but when I zoomed in even more on these shots, you can definitely see that the 16 Pro's images are actually showing more details. 16's image is filled with a lot of noise because of the extra sharpness that it applies. That being said, you will notice all these things only when you zoom in 8, 9 or 10 times. Otherwise, these high resolution shots from both the phones look incredibly detailed. Now you should know that the iPhone 16 Pro lets you shoot 48 megapixel RAW images, whereas ones from the iPhone 16 are in the JPEG Max format, which means ones from the iPhone 16 Pro are completely RAW images, whereas ones from the iPhone 16 are going through some sort of image processing on the phone's part. Hence we see the added sharpness in its images. As detailed and huge as the 48 megapixel shots are, I like to stick to the default 24 megapixel shots on both these phones, because I think those ones capture enough details and they are much more manageable in terms of file sizes. For the portrait shots, I feel both these phones are doing a great job. 16 Pro gets a LiDAR sensor, which helps the phone detecting the depth for these portrait shots. iPhone 16 doesn't get this feature, but you can still see edge detection in the portrait shots on the iPhone 16 being just as good as the ones on the iPhone 16 Pro. Just look at these shots. Both are doing an excellent job of isolating the subject from the background even if the background is so complex. The subject is in perfect sharp focus from both. Skin tones are exactly as they are in real life, the colors look good, dynamic range is excellent, and even the white balance is on point for these portrait shots. The only minute difference here is that the iPhone 16 Pro is trying to evenly lit the face, whereas the iPhone 16 is capturing the scene as it was. The difference is subtle, but if you look closer, you can see slightly more shadows in the face in the shot from the iPhone 16, whereas the 16 Pro is trying to brighten up the face to make it look even. Both allow us to take 2x zoomed in portrait shots, and since they don't have a 2x telephoto lens, this is being achieved via software. I love how Apple has managed to mimic the optical qualities of a real zoom lens with software. Here are 1x portrait shots on the same scene, and these are 2x portraits. You can see that the image is not just zoomed in, but we also see the lens compression being at work here, where the things that are further back appear bigger and closer. You can't achieve this by zooming in digitally 2 times on your normal portrait shots. So what Apple has going on in the background for processing these specific shots is nothing short of a miracle. The edge detection is still really good from both. I won't say it is perfect, as both can use some refinement via software updates. Both can zoom in even further, and here are 3x zoomed in portraits. Now while these look good, and the edge detection, skin tones, colors, blur in the background, everything is pretty much as you would want it, I feel we start losing a bit of details in the subject at this point. The faces of the subject are not as sharp in these 3x portrait shots. I mean, they still look good, but they are just not as detailed as the ones in the 1x or 2x portrait shots. So for this reason, I stick to the 1x and 2x portrait shots on the regular iPhone 16. 16 Pro on the other hand can take portrait shots with a 5x lens as well, and they just look incredible. If you frame your shots properly, these ones look like they have been captured with a DSLR camera. I think shooting these ones at f5.0 or f6.3 makes them look even better. The only downside is you have to be very far away from your subject for taking these shots if you want to capture any of the surrounding or background in your images. And since they are from a 5x telephoto lens which has a smaller sensor and narrower aperture compared to the main camera, these portrait shots look the best when there is a lot of light on your subject, like in these outdoor conditions during daytime. Again, there is no clear winner when it comes to taking portrait shots of objects. Both the phones do an amazing job. I thought the iPhone 16 Pro with the LiDAR sensor would be way ahead of the regular iPhone 16 in helping it detect the edges of the objects effectively. But we see the iPhone 16 doing just as good as the iPhone 16 Pro in all of these shots. So while I love taking 5x portrait shots on the iPhone 16 Pro, that is a very specific case scenario, as even I don't use this lens for taking portrait shots very often due to less favorable lighting conditions. So again, I feel the iPhone 16 is just as good as the iPhone 16 Pro for portrait shots as well. Now we come to the images which were shot in artificial and lower lighting conditions. These are typically the conditions where most of the smartphones start showing their weaknesses. But these are not typical smartphones. Both of them are pretty much the best that Apple could offer, and we see them showing their capabilities in these conditions as well. Since the lighting conditions are less than ideal, a smartphone's camera need to keep the shutter open for a longer time so more light could hit the sensor. A wider aperture in front of the sensor goes a long way in these conditions. As you can see, even here, both of them are capturing very similar looking shots. Even when I crop in 300% on these shots, we can't really see a visible difference between them. Frankly, I'm very impressed with how well Apple has managed to tune in the image sensor and image processing on the regular iPhone 16. Despite of it having a smaller image sensor, they managed to make it take images which look almost similar to the ones from the iPhone 16 Pro. Now we are getting into even lower lighting situations. These are typically the conditions where we notice some noise starting to creep in the images from most of the smartphones. But again, these are not like most smartphones. We can still see that these images are mostly noise-free even now. And again, both are seen to be capturing very similar looking images with a lot of details overall. If you saw my last video where I showed you the images from the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, you must know that it captured softer images in lower light compared to the daytime. That is not the case with either of these two phones. Even as we zoom in, we see detailed and sharp images from both of them. They also handle the brighter light sources really well and don't let them blow away the entire scene. In other words, HDR is working well in lower light as well. You will see some noise starting to make its way when the light gets even lower and when we have a lot of darker areas in the scene, like in these shots. This is not too much noise and it is not making the shot look bad, but you will start noticing it in your images in much lower lighting conditions. Now we come to a major issue which has been ruining photos on iPhones in lower light for 3 to 4 years by this point. It is the lens flare or reflections like these. You can see them in a lot of shots where you have a bright light source somewhere in the frame. They are very distracting and are present on both the phones. In my experience, I have seen the iPhone 16 Pro handle them slightly better, as you can see in this set of images. Now you did not see these flares in many of my other low light shots, because in the last 3 to 4 years, I have learned to compose my shot by moving the camera slightly to either avoid them or move it in a way that these light flares are overlaid on the light source so they are not visible. I know it is not possible to do this every time, but this issue just isn't addressable in any other way. Here's something which is different on both the phones. I left the night mode on auto and let them decide when to switch it on depending on the lighting conditions. And the regular iPhone 16 decides to switch to the night mode in a lot of conditions where the 16 Pro captures a normal shot. So the bigger sensor on the iPhone 16 Pro helps it capture slightly more light without switching to the night mode until the light is very low. Now at this point onwards, I turned the night mode on both the phones as the light was very low. If we look closer, we see slightly less noise in the images from the iPhone 16 Pro, and it also always took 1 second less exposure time compared to the iPhone 16 for all of these shots. You guys look at the next set of night mode shots from both the phones and let me know in the comments that which one do you think did better in these conditions. If you ask me, I think both are very similar, and if you need to zoom in 3 to 4 times to find the extra bit of noise that the iPhone 16 has captured, then I don't even consider that to be an issue. These are 2x digitally zoomed in night mode shots, and again they look really good from both. Please disregard the blurry leaves in the iPhone 16 Pro's image as there was a bit of wind when I took its shot, but I feel like rest of the zoomed in shot looks really good from both the phones. And now this is a 5x zoomed in shot from the iPhone 16 Pro. Honestly, I'm surprised to see how crisp and detailed this one has turned out. Yes, it was night time and we had a dense cloud cover, and the light that you're seeing in the background is just the noise pollution. So the phone is not trying to bring up the light and make the night shot appear as day. This is actually how the scene looked when I took this shot. This one is in even lower lighting conditions, and again I'm happy with the kind of details that the iPhone 16 Pro is capturing here. For the ultra wide angle lens, I was expecting the one from the iPhone 16 Pro to take much better images than the iPhone 16, but again I'm barely noticing any differences here. Both the phones take 3 to 5 second exposure time while shooting with the ultra wide angle lens in these lighting conditions, which I feel is too long of a time to hold the phone steady. So in my day-to-day life, I just don't switch to these lenses when the light goes down. But if you think you are going to take a lot of ultra wide angle night mode shots, I would say you can go with either of them and get pretty much similar results. I was hoping that the 48 megapixel sensor on the iPhone 16 Pro will use pixel binning and capture more details. In a way, it does capture slightly more details, but you will have to zoom in 5 to 6 times to see the difference. These ultra-wide cameras on both the phones don't cause any lens flare, which is interesting as these ones get lower quality lenses in front of the sensor as compared to the main camera. That brings us to the front-facing cameras. The selfies from both these phones again look identical. They are using the same 12 megapixel sensor and lens combo for these images, and since the image processing pipeline is also same, you basically can't tell a difference between these images. The colors look as they are in real life, white balance and skin tones are perfect, and even the dynamic range is excellent in most of these shots. All of this is true for the portrait selfies as well. Now I have let the background to be blurred out so much so you can see how the edge detection is on both the phones. But if you want your portrait selfies to look good and natural, make sure to have your aperture set to something between f4.0 or 5.6 for these portrait shots. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the iPhone 16 and the iPhone 16 Pro. You can see how both these phones are handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I'm walking around with them. The audio is also being recorded internally and I'll be switching between both these phones, so you guys let me know in the comments which one do you think is picking my voice better. Here's a cinematic mode video sample from both these cameras. These videos can be recorded with the front-facing camera and the main rear camera. The key to make these videos look good is to shoot at a higher aperture number. This video has been shot at f6.3 and I think that gives a very good edge detection, and the background blur also really looks really good. We won't be spending too much time with the videos either because they again look similar from both the phones. Details and video resolution options are same on both of them. The frame rate is now a bit different. You can shoot at a maximum resolution of 4K 60fps from all of the cameras on the iPhone 16. On the main camera of the iPhone 16 Pro, now you can record 4K videos at up to 120fps. It also lets you shoot ProRes log videos if you want to capture most amount of information and dynamic range in your videos, so you can color grade them later on according to your project requirements. We can make a whole different video about just this. The main takeaway is, if you don't know what I just talked about, chances are you won't be needing this feature. But if you are a pro videographer, then you already know that you are going to get the iPhone 16 Pro for this specific feature alone. If something else that is different while shooting videos, then that is the amount of zoom that they can achieve. iPhone 16 just can't match the quality and the amount of zoom that the iPhone 16 Pro has. This is thanks to the extra telephoto lens on the 16 Pro. So if you need a further reach while clicking images or videos, you can definitely go with the iPhone 16 Pro. Low light videos again look similar from both, and here is an example of that. You can just see little extra noise in the darker parts of the videos from the iPhone 16, and that is about it. Rest videos look same. After everything that we have seen until now, even if the iPhone 16 Pro gets an extra camera and it has a few more pro-centric features, if I was trying to decide between these two phones, I will just go ahead and pick the iPhone 16. As good as the cameras on the iPhone 16 Pro are, I don't feel like they are worth 40,000 rupees extra, at least for me. Even if you put the images from both these phones next to each other like I did in the entire video, I promise you are not going to notice any huge difference in majority of their shots. I think this makes a huge argument for how good Apple has made the cameras on the regular iPhone 16 this time. Unless you know that you are specifically going to need the extra telephoto lens and the ability to record ProRes log videos, I think iPhone 16 is going to be just good enough for most people. I purchased both these phones at the launch and I'm still holding on to both of them because I had to make a lot of videos about both of them. But if I was trying to decide between the two right now, I would pick the regular iPhone 16 in a heartbeat and just save a bunch of money. If the price difference was not as much, or if you are planning on getting this phone let's say from US, Japan or Hong Kong and then bringing it to India, then I would say definitely go with the iPhone 16 Pro, as you could be getting it for much cheaper over there. So after checking out all of these image and video samples, which one of these do you think did better in the camera department? And if you are trying to make the decision, which one would you be going with based on their cameras? Let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.